Welcome back to our learning module on return on investment. We are going to discuss CEREC as a piece of technology right now. Now, although there are other pieces of technology in its class that exist, we're going to discuss CEREC only because, quite frankly, it is in a class of its own. It is head and shoulders above any other company's version of it. So, as I mentioned in Module 1, we're going to evaluate both risks and benefits of each piece of technology. So if we're considering CEREC and finances, the price tag is pretty costly. It's about $130,000 on day one. Now what that includes is the intraoral scanner, what you and I will use to take images in patient's mouth. It includes a milling machine, what we use to actually mill a crown, a partial crown, or a veneer. And it also includes some training. Patterson and Sirona do a really nice job of helping us off the bat to get from where we are to where we need to be. But the initial cost, quite expensive. Now remember, financially there's two parts. It's what we pay up front and it's what we pay down the line. So there are other costs involved with CEREC. The first one is the cost of the blocks. Where you traditionally have paid for a lab to build us a crown or a partial crown, we now pay for a milling machine, blocks, and burrs that make that crown for us. Now the cost of the typical block runs between $25 and $30, and the cost of the burrs that mill for us are about $10 to $15 a burr. So on average, in addition to the $130,000, what you need to plan for is about $30 to $40 per unit of crown and bridge that you fabricate. Not bad. If we start looking at the learning curve, as I mentioned, what Sirona and Patterson do real well is they provide some basic training in the beginning, and they also supply every office with an in-office training day. If you take advantage of those training sessions, you're in a pretty good spot. But what I can tell you is it takes the average new user about 2 to 3 months to become really proficient with CEREC. So what that means is if it takes you an hour and a half to do a crown normally, you might have to add an extra 20-30 minutes on top of that when you're learning how to use the software, when you're learning how to take pictures. So from a learning curve standpoint, you need more time in the beginning. You have to factor that in. As far as integration goes, the risk there is you've made a major investment in your practice and a major investment in your patients. If you do not use this technology because you either find that it takes you too much time or you're having a challenging time learning how to take pictures, you have bought yourself a really expensive coat rack. Now the second thing to consider for integration is how your patients perceive your new purchase. We'll talk about some benefits of that on the other side, but right now the risks are you have a segment of patients who are very used to you bringing them in and on appointment 1, preparing a tooth, making an impression, put a temporary on, and 2 to 3 weeks later, they come back and you take your temporary off and you insert a crown. The game is totally changed. You're now going to bring them in for a longer period of time and take it from start to finish. Now you and I see that as a significant advantage, but oftentimes change is challenging for people. So if a patient is very used to you working on them over the course of 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it is possible for them to wonder why it is you're doing it differently, and it can be perceived in a negative fashion. On the upside with CEREC, what are the benefits financially? So like I said, it's a big nut to crack when you make the purchase, but the average lab in the US, the average quality lab I should say, charges you about $175 to fabricate any unit of crown and bridge, whether it's a crown or an onlay, an inlay, or a veneer. Call it $175. Like I mentioned earlier, with CEREC, aside from making the payment on the machine, it costs you somewhere between $30 and $40 to actually cover the cost and fabricate a unit. So here's the deal. Most people buy this technology because it's so expensive, like they buy a house or a car. You make a down payment on it and then you buy it over the course of 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. So you have a monthly payment that can fit into your practice's budget. Now say, for example, your payment is about $1,800 because that's what it runs for most people. If you're paying $175 a unit, once you have done enough units of Crown and Bridge to get to that $1,800 payment, you now start making each crown or each partial crown at $40 a tooth instead of $170 a tooth. So if you're in an active practice where you're doing a lot of Crown and Bridge, from a financial standpoint, CEREC can be very profitable for you. If you're doing 20, 25, 30, 40 or more crowns per month, you will actually start making money owning a CEREC machine, even though the initial price tag is pretty expensive. On the flip side, if you're in a practice and you're only doing 5 or 10 crowns per month and you make this purchase, at $130,000, you're going to be in some trouble. But there is a very large upside if you have a busy Crown and Bridge driven practice. The second benefit, better treatment. Is that the case with CEREC? Hands down. We have a lot of studies that show us time and time again that a restoration that is milled, meaning we scanned it with the camera, and then whether you do it yourself or you still send it to a lab, it is milled from a porcelain block. Those restorations, after about 10,000 units have been studied in the last decade, outperform and are the dentist's choice about 98% of the time. The camera is just a much more accurate way to capture the shape we've made than making a physical impression, which can introduce a little bit of error, and then pouring that physical impression with stone, which can introduce a little more error, and then you add the human factor with wax and investing and all those things you're learning about in school. So CEREC is better treatment today than we've been able to offer in the past. And the final benefit, and never ever underestimate it, the power of marketing. Perception is reality in your patient's eyes. And this technology, although on the risk side, when we spoke about an integration, how sometimes a patient can see it as something they're paying for because it is a big price tag. On the benefit side, most people today are going to look at this technology and see you as cutting edge. They're going to see you on top of the game, and they're going to be amazingly appreciative that they now only need to come in for one appointment instead of two. They're numb one time. There's no temporary to worry about coming on and off. They don't have a mouthful of goop in order to capture a shape like they've been used to their whole life. So CEREC can be an amazing marketing tool, and I can tell you, of the 65 of us who teach it across the country, we all get patients from other dentist practice specifically because we own CEREC, and we are doing one-day crowns as opposed to multiple visit crowns. So all in all, if you're looking at a piece of technology like CEREC, there are some risks to consider, of course, and there are some major benefits you can receive. But it's a solid piece of technology, and it is the way dentistry is moving in the future.